But I'm here. I think I don't remember working out here. But I don't remember not going here out here.
Never gone, never gone.
It would have been more
Yeah,
relaxed.
he's somebody I know personally. And then the kids, like my daughter and his daughter. Went to school. We're live. Therefore, we show that. Careful, here with that. Is that what that's now? They built a whole pot there. All this is locked.
Done.
All right, well, would like to welcome everyone out to the Planning Commission this evening. I'd like to recognize Gary, who is on remotely with us. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you.
And then Commissioner Walton is excused this evening, so he will not be.
No, he's not.
Oh, he's not.
No, he's not.
McFadden.
McFadden.
I don't know why I get you guys confused like that. All right, I apologize. Commissioner, let me repeat that. Commissioner
I was ready to
McFadden is excused. And he will not be able to make it this evening. We'll go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance, which I will lead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just real
Yes.
quickly,
Go
I
ahead.
can't see anything. It's just dark. It looked like the camera spun and went off.
It's been working. No, that's why I have it on, that's why.
It was on, it was good to go.
Yeah, it was on, this isn't gonna work, this camera doesn't work at all. This one does work, it was working earlier, maybe it just needs to be restarted that camera. It's working about 2 days ago. It's working 2 minutes ago.
It blinked red a second ago.
I know, I just saw that.
Bear with us, Gary. Technical difficulties.
No, that's okay. I'm okay with it. I'm just thinking about the YouTube broadcast. So
Right now, you get to be the sole representative visually for the planning commission meeting tonight.
well, I might turn my camera off just for that.
You're like, don't think you.
Commissioner Davis can excuse you too.
Oh, I'm here. You just won't see me.
All right, I'm not gonna leave that one down.
We're on camera. Blame it on the echo flavor.
I know, that was so great.
I'm telling you, you're gonna find a pumpkin spice one.
That one would still be better. At least in my mind it does. Yeah. It's all Blair's fault. He showed up and it broke.
I mean, he needs to be able to die.
Yeah.
So the camera was working, but then it looked like it turned, and then when it turned all the way, it went off. And it had come back on just about a minute ago. But just so you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah, it's almost like it turned itself off and yeah.
That one, it won't show the guys, but I'll just give it.
Well, play by play, we got Trevor and Blair standing on chairs. Hopefully this doesn't turn into a safety hazard, OSHA concern.
Both feet are firmly on the flat part of the chair, so I think we're gonna be okay. There's a harness. They're only 2 feet off the ground.
Camera was reset. Looks like it might. Oh, there we go.
Ta-da!
looks good.
Are we good officially? Okay. Item number 2, public comment. Just a reminder to be respectful with your comments and to try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. So we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Oh, this it's really good.
Gary just got the biggest smile on his face.
All right. All right, moving on to, I don't need to close public comment, do I? Okay. I'm getting there. I'm gonna, as soon as I get it down, I won't be in this role anymore. Yeah. All right, so item number 3, approval of consent agenda. And I'll open it up for my fellow commissioners if they have any comments on the agenda.
I had 2 points, comments. The first one on page 7 of the packet, which is page 6 of the meeting minutes. The recommendations from the PC meeting from the 8th or August the 11th of 2022. Option F was listed twice. And I believe that was an error. It was supposed to be option E was the other duplicate F. So I just want to make sure that that gets corrected.
Okay.
And then the only other item is that it looks like the public comments and the input, they're not being added to the meeting minutes. And so I just want to make sure, because aren't they supposed to be part of the packet?
Yeah,
And I didn't see them.
that's a good point. If it wasn't, then I'll make sure it's there.
Okay, perfect. And that was it. That was my only comment on
Yeah,
that,
I always do, so that was an error on my part.
which is fine.
Good catch.
Because I just want to make sure, I know it's important when we do get public comment, whether it's here presented live in chambers or even emailed in. And I want to make sure that those citizens know that we're seeing it.
Yeah.
And it's available for future reference too. So that was it.
Commissioner Bolton?
Yeah, I just had a small change. So on page 7 of 12 of the packet, just a comment that I made about these strategies not influencing the economy enough to become. Can I get that changed to provide moderate income housing?
To provide, instead of become.
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
And-
Thank you.
Commissioner Boatright, any adjustments to the minutes?
Sorry, I had to find my mute button. No, I'm good and support the changes that were discussed.
Okay, I am good as well. So I'll request a motion on that one with the adjustments.
So oh gosh, let's see if I got enough notes to do this. I'll make a motion that we approve consent agenda for the planning commission meeting on August 11th, 2022, with the provision that the second option F be changed to reflect option E as being an alternative or an option. And also the changing of the wording on page 7 of 12 to provide moderate income housing
and input.
and include the public comments that were received for that meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. All right, item number 4, discussion on the R7 zone amendments. So Trevor, if you want to take it away and kind of go over what you have for us.
Okay. So back, if you remember back when we discussed the Gateway project in the city council meeting, city council entered into a administrative development agreement with that project, stipulating various items. One of those items was that the city would look at our R7 code to create an opportunity for them to come and replat for single family ownership plats inside the R7 zone. And so we have had many discussions in code committee, not COD committee. I apologize for that typo. We don't have fish during that meeting, but we had a lot of conversations about the R7 zone. There's a lot of I know there's always lingering feelings around this zone, especially when we talk about density. And so we took our time to make sure that we had valuable conversations about various different items and things that are affected by this zone. The items that were specifically noted in the city council meeting and as we've went through the planning commission for the R7 zone were the limitations of the ability to add 0 lot line developments, the absence of townhome definition was brought up, and the inclusion of setback provisions that oriented buildings based on lot configuration and not on the orientation of buildings toward a right of way. As we were discussing that zone, because our code is written as it was a single lot subdivision, all the buildings just had to be oriented towards the main road, the front of that lot. And so we looked at those 3 items in code committee to talk about how can we fix this for the future in multifamily developments if those do come anywhere. Right now, there's no plan for them. So this is really just kind of a retro fix type thing. There's no future plans for the R7 zone in any other portion of the city. However, that was the conversation that we had about that. As we discussed, the R7 zone, some ancillary issues were brought up on for discussion that don't necessarily have any bearing with what the direction from the city council are. However, I included those insights just as a way to have the conversation, initiate the conversation, and as we go through. What our goal is tonight is to look at kind of the input from the code committee. I broke that into a table talking about what the current code states, what any revisions would be based on the council's direction to create that opportunity for ownership inside the R7 zone using townhomes. And then any alternate revisions that were discussed in code committee, and we can discuss those as long as they're as short as you guys would like. So kind of going through, I'll first go through talking about the revisions that we discussed in code committee based on the council's direction. So the first was to add a definition, add several definitions or update several definitions to help facilitate single family ownership in townhomes. First is to create a definition for zero lot line setback that allows us to create a zero lot line for two units to rest side by side. Dwelling townhouse as a definition for the section specifically puts a one family single dwelling unit with private entrance as part of a structure that is attached. Clarifying the yard. So right now our yard definitions orient towards the lot line. So this creates the opportunity to have a lot line conversation, or based on the development, the orientation of it towards a private or towards the right of way, if that is a multifamily development type thing. So it has a little allows for that configuration on the lot. And then adding the in the R7 zone, a permitted use of a dwelling townhouse. This definition was added to kind of add as a mirror to the condo definition. Since we have that definition, we're able to do condoed units. And since townhouse is separate because you're owning the ground underneath and not the airspace within the home, it allows for that separate definition and allows as a permitted use in the R7 zone. As we get to items that are also needing to have a look at is two of the things that we didn't discuss in city council meeting that became very apparent as we were looking at are the lot area and lot width designated inside the R7 zone. Right now, the lot area is a minimum of 12,000 square feet for a single family use or two family dwelling. And the lot width, each lot has a minimum width of 100 feet. There are provisions for other dwelling types other than single family for lot area. And so that doesn't necessarily have to change. But as we're discussing in regards to single family use, our R7 code is more restrictive in the fact that it requires a larger lot area than the zone just underneath it of the RP zone, which allow a 6,000 square foot lot area. So just kind of matching that as a single family use on that R7 property. Then with the lot width is matching the lot width for the RP zone, which is 65 feet, and then also allowing for a smaller lot widths for other dwelling types, like townhomes, because those lot widths can vary from 25 feet to 35 feet. And so kind of breaking that out of the single family realm and utilizing that. Zero lot line would be adding that definition, and then within the code talking about to facilitate separate ownership or leasehold of two family, twin home, or multifamily dwellings. The residential zero lot line setback is permitted on recommendation of the planning commission and approval of the city council. And then in no case shall a zero lot line setback be allowed adjacent to a property line that is not part of the subdivision. That just allows it to not butt right up against the end of the property. The discussion about shared common open space. This helps us define which buildings how we would orient the buildings on the setbacks. So subdivisions that utilize a shared common open space under single ownership with multifamily, townhouse, or two-family units shall orient building setbacks in relation to the street right-of-way and other main structures on the shared property. That allows you to create that orientation within that property. Right now on the setback table, there's a definition just for dwellings. What we discussed was creating a definition for single-family dwellings and then one for two-family, twin home, multifamily dwellings for the setbacks on the setback table as well. So this is a working copy. It's our opportunity to kind of have the conversations around these, and I'm happy to have a little more conversations. Kim, is there? No, that's it. Okay. I had a different page that was set up a little bit differently, but that was not this packet. So that's all that I have. It's open for discussion at this point to kind of talk about those points and talk through any of the thinking there.
To help organize this, since I'm sure there's some opinions on across the board and to prevent us from hopping around, my recommendation is that we kind of tackle one section at a time. Unless I have some objections to that. Everybody okay with that strategy?
So I'm okay with doing that. I think by and large, the code is not ready to go to the council.
No.
What I'd much rather be able to do is say, what are the items that we need to clear off the decks to allow individual title to the plats, so that we can encourage them being offered for sale and not just for rent.
Okay, so I think we can definitely reach that by going through these. If there are areas that we agree aren't ready for discussion, we want to have staff go back to the, well, not go back, just kind of go to
Code committee.
the committee or even get some additional direction from the city council on different opinions and then come back to us with a real first draft. I think that's definitely possible.
So kind of the goal that we have at this point would be to, this isn't an ordinance, right? It's not ready for a public hearing or for even recommendations of city council. What we're doing tonight is just discussing these topics, seeing from the planning commission's viewpoint if these items allow better use of the R7 zone to create single family ownership of townhomes on it, right? And then so it's completely up to you on how long you want to take that process, but we can kind of start there.
So Trevor, I think it'd be beneficial. Maybe I missed it in what you led with, but can you outline the circumstance a little bit about why we couldn't offer in the last development proposal homes for sale instead of?
Yeah, so they're the three items that were an issue were within our code, within the R7 zone, there's no provision for zero lot lines. Zero lot line, there's a lot of different ways that codes state it, whether they have it defined as zero lot line or in the setback tables, they put a zero as the side lot line, right? As it allows for a zero setback lot line. So our code in the setback table did not have any provisions for zero lot lines. It also did not have a definition for zero lot lines within the code, and did not have a use other than condo plat to have a zero lot line option. Right? The condo plat is an approved use within the R7, and so that would have been allowed for all intents and purposes zero lot line use. But when you're doing a condo plat, you are condoing the airspace within a unit. Whereas when you're doing a townhome plat, you are creating a lot where you have ownership of the ground underneath the unit and the unit itself within the wall. So it's kind of a two-dimensional ownership versus a three-dimensional ownership. And so there are some developers that prefer a condoed use, and that option was given to the developer at the time, and they chose not to use that use. They were more in favor of a townhome type use where it allowed the lots to be platted underneath the buildings. And so that was the first issue, that we couldn't do a 0 lot line because that wasn't an allowed provision within the R7 zone. If the developer chose to do a PUD, they would, within our code, they would have that provision and the ability to do that because it's within the PUD conditional use section of our code, but not found within the zone. And the developer was in favor of using the strict zoning ordinance. So that's the two kind of 0 lot line, and then the definition of a townhome. So that was one additional fix, was let's define what a townhome is with a shared wall so that it is also an acceptable use within that zone. Then there was issues with just setback provisions. In general, there's some concern about the setbacks within the R7 zone because where that development had a private right of way within the development, it was within a single lot. And so we oriented all of the buildings based off the lot. And so they could have placed those buildings, as long as they fit within the building envelope, they could have placed them wherever building code would allow them to build within that area. So those are the three main issues in them being able to plat it as a condo plat, or a townhome plat, I'm sorry.
So if I can clarify one of those real quick. So the concerns on the setbacks and the building orientation, was that more of a concern that the city council had and not so much a provision within our code needs to be fixed? I don't understand that one better. Like, they could still do it.
Yeah. What ends up happening is that when you start doing a townhome plat, you start creating lots within the townhome plat, and therefore it kind of creates a kind of conundrum. And so to ease that conversation of where the setback should be, if you do a townhome plat, then you do it off the building orientation, because all the individual lots would be inside that building, and therefore it creates it a little bit easier to determine where those setbacks are. So as we looked at the code, whereas the setbacks and how they were right now didn't necessarily prohibit it, it became muddy as we started allowing for 0 lot lines, and our code is set up with setbacks oriented toward the lot. So as the townhome lot would come online, then that lot would have to be larger or smaller, or it would have to kind of be oriented a little bit awkwardly. Therefore, like with the lot widths, right? If we do a townhome lot, then that lot width would, right now in the code says that would have to be a minimum of 100 feet, where we could allow for a smaller width to be able to put that townhome unit next to another townhome unit. Does that make sense? But so it kind of necessitated, as we started digging into it, you just see kind of all the other pieces that setbacks touch and the other items touch as well.
So the setbacks and building orientation didn't preclude us from titling those as for individual ownership. It was just a messy situation.
Right. As we started diving in, and so ideally in a perfect world, if we would have just put a line that says 0 lot lines are accepted, then that would be great. However, then in the planning realm, and when we're trying to look at the plat and review it, once we put 0 lot lines, then there's other considerations. Well, the setbacks are a little bit different, because the 0 lot line setback needs to have a 0 setback, right? And then so you start creating these other ancillary things that are like, okay, well, we can't just change that wording without also adjusting everything around it so that it makes the most sense when we come in. That's also kind of why we're workshopping it together, because it's not an easy thing for one person to do. So we've done it in code committee, but we need more brains on it to make sure that we poke all the holes in all the thinking. So
Thanks, Trevor.
Okay, so let's just start at the top and then we'll just do each section to see if there are any major concerns that any of us have for each section that Trevor can take to draft to draft this as a first draft and then come back to us, you say in October, right? Okay, so let's open it up for discussion on 10-110. And then I'll start with you, Gary. If you have any concerns, we'll just do a round table on each section real quick here.
I'm good.
Commissioner Losi, anything on 10-110?
No, I'm glad we've got it defined. I actually like the definitions that are in there. Just for background purposes, where were the definitions and kind of everything pulled? Was it patterned off of another city?
Other cities, I kind of looked at a lot of different areas. We will make sure that this verbiage is tightly packed.
Iron-tight.
Jamie's done a cursory overview,
Okay.
but as we draft the ordinance, he'll look deeper and make sure that we have all of these bases covered. But yeah, a lot of other codes were looked at, kind of comparing to our code and matching that way. So.
Okay. My only, and that's just because this is part of discussion, I know when you look under the definition of the townhouse and how it says, it kind of cuts over to the next page on page 10, where it says it's between 1 and 4 units. Is there any issue with that when we start getting into the density?
No, it would just be the number of units per building.
Per building?
Right.
Okay, it's not necessarily saying, hey, you can have 1 to 4 in a building.
Mhm.
We're saying, okay, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't going to be any issues
No,
where those would like.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my only other thing. I'm glad, I like that we have the definitions. I wish we could have had this done the first time around so that we wouldn't be having this issue, because and part of this with this discussion tonight is I'm just kind of worried I had to write this down, because if the intention of these zone changes is to allow for the 0 lot lines and townhomes that will be a for sale product, how does this regarding the South Weaver Gateway actually happen, given that they've already been given approval under our R7 code as it exists?
Mhm.
And I know there was discussion at city council for them to come back, to reapply for a rezone with the new changes that would allow for 0 lot lines. I'm just really trying to figure out how, even though the discussion's for future
Mhm.
zoning, how do we actually help this fix the problem
Mhm.
that we had and that we discovered with the South Weaver Gateway project?
Right.
So-
So with South Weaver Gateway, when I mentioned they entered into a development, administrative development agreement, one of the other agreements that the developer made was that as we update our code, they will come back and replat.
Okay.
So.
Commissioner Walton?
The only thing that I bring up in that section is, the fact that we're kind of limiting ourselves to a definition of just townhomes that could accomplish a very similar function of other housing types in an R7 zone. So just nothing wrong with the language. I just want to put a note there to say that we would probably want other definitions for other dwelling types to accompany that at some point.
What other dwelling types are you thinking?
Or some of them. We were talking about the mansion style dwellings.
Cottage court was another one. Oh, shoot, I lost it now.
The ones referenced in your memo?
Yeah, there's mansion style cottage court were the two major ones. There's also like there's stacked, right? So you have stacked flats, I think,
Okay.
that you could do that.
I do like the call out though, because if we pinhole ourselves into a single definition and then something comes up and like, man, it would be really good if we had this in the code, then we gotta do this whole thing all over again.
Mhm.
So I think
Something noted to continue the conversation.
Well, is there a way that with us defining a dwelling as a townhouse, can we define a dwelling as a cottage court?
Mhm.
Define a dwelling as a mansion style, so that we're adding it to the matrix all at the same time, and we're kind of taking care of that, allowing for those within an R7 code, but and I don't know if it's an overlay, if it would be.
So it could be. So we could do it a few different ways. I think I have definitions for those already, so that shouldn't be a hard thing to put
Okay.
in. We can put that in with this, and then as a use with kind of like a holder to say, let's come back and talk about how do we create an overlay.
Mm.
with
And I say
those-
the word overlay very cautiously,
Yes, you do.
because
I do too.
Yeah. like it
I do
actually
too.
causes my neck to swell up and
Yes.
I breathe. So,
Yeah.
Uh,
So
If it, if that gives everybody heartburn, then let's not even go down that road.
The overlay.
Yeah.
Did it give you heartburn?
Oh, absolutely. I
Okay.
about fell out of my
No.
chair when you said it, so.
Well, you saw my hesitation to even say the word, and it was just because I didn't know what other word to say that's not that word, but how do we go about doing this, you know, and still, and I think part of it is because we do have a little bit more control when it is a multi-unit development, when it comes to design requests, they're always requests. You know, that we don't have at the single family level. So we just want to make sure, obviously in this rewrite, we don't want to be coming back and rewriting this code again in a year, which is, I think, is the time frame from when the last time our 7 code was rewritten, maybe 2. So,
Makes sense. Anything else, Tyler?
Nope, not that section.
The only call out I have on this section is, I don't know if it's wise for us to limit ourselves to the up to 4 units per structure. And I only say that because, and I'm not a builder, but I know that I've seen rows that have more than 4 and it didn't look bad. And I think that could come in sometimes handy as an option. So just something to consider. I'm not saying we need to have something more or less than 4, but
Some of the conversation in code committee, because we had that conversation about how many units to put in a townhouse is a structure. Dialed back to wanting to have variation in the development, so it doesn't feel like one long flat building. A limitation that we have with townhomes is that they are by definition, by state definition, they're a single family unit that is attached, right? And so by that definition, they're not multifamily, and so we cannot impose any design standards on townhomes.
Hmm.
On any other multifamily, we can, but
wait,
because
townhomes, we can't?
townhomes we can't because they're individual single family units
unless we use an
as
overlay.
defined by the state. Now, unless, I will say, unless we use an overlay that allows
For
for
For just
zoning
townhomes.
incentives.
just
I'm
townhomes.
gonna say that
The design
very
standard,
careful.
or was it? Because we can't, it's very restrictive on like materials, colors, all that stuff. But the form that the building takes, we can still influence.
Architectural style, we can't on single family.
But I'm not even thinking architectural style, I'm thinking about how the building is massed on a lot.
So I'll have to pull the code, but last I had read, like we can't even dictate like dormers or eaves or.
Do you know when that changed?
Articulation.
Because I feel like we used to have,
2 years ago, I believe.
how do we change it back?
Talk
How do we
to your
start that
legislature.
process?
No, so this is.
Call the
Call the
legislature?
So.
Anybody specific? I should be addressing my comments.
Yeah, I'll pull that code and we can talk about, I can send that out as a reference. We had that conversation with Jamie and he specifically pulled out that
The code.
the code from the state that says, you know, we can't dictate architectural styling unless it is in an overlay zone that provides zoning incentives. And when we say that, it means increased units per acre. Density. So, so if we allow for more units per acre, then we could dictate style. And that's how a lot of form-based, if it's found within an overlay zone or a form-based code area, that's how you can dictate the style of a single family dwelling. But if it's outside of those zones, then we can't dictate a single family dwelling. We can for multifamily. So on a mansion home, if we want to do a mansion home, we can dictate the styling of that to look as if it is a larger single family home that has individual for sale condos or rental units within it.
Okay.
That
Because mansion style homes is more of a condo style, meaning you own the airspace, you don't own ground underneath.
and so it's a multifamily unit. Mhm.
All right, moving on. 10.1.10A. Gary, any comments on 10.1.10A?
Oh, yes, let me just bring that up again, make sure I'm referring to the right thing. 10.1.10A, yeah, I don't like conditional uses. I think it either should be permitted or not, but so that's my only concern with that.
Okay. Commissioner Walton?
I guess
Just one item, yeah, 10-1 and 10.
Yeah, so Gary, I'm going back to maybe ask you a clarifying point, maybe you're a little bit more in depth there. Like, what is it about the conditional use process that you don't want to do here?
Well, I thought we were going towards a route where we were trying to get rid of conditional uses at one point.
Yeah, I think generally I agree. Are we saying that we don't want to have townhouses in R7?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if
Just get away
if we
from-
want them, let's just make them permitted.
Don't make them conditional, basically.
Yeah,
My understanding is if we're making them conditional, they're going to be permitted just with conditions.
Mhm.
They're permitted with conditions. One, so it was brought up in code committee as making it a conditional use rather than a permitted use. The issue with conditional uses is we have to have conditions that we're trying to mitigate. And so I'm not aware of too many items we can mitigate in this situation, right? Typically, we're looking at lighting, noise, impact to the environment, traffic. And while that's all done in the architectural review already.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if it needs to be a conditional use necessarily, if we have the conditions that we want to include, maybe we just include them more in the code rather than as a conditional use, but that's
Hmm.
kind of a philosophy thing.
and Trevor, you said exactly what I was thinking, so.
And my only comment on that is then, once you have a conditional use, then you have to have obviously an enforcement of those conditional uses and kind of a check. And who's doing that? How are we doing that? And just, I don't know. I kind of feel like if we're gonna have it, define it clearly, exactly what we want to allow. And then that's what we go forward with, so.
Mhm.
Because a conditional use it's a yes, like we had that during one of our workshops. Most people think, oh, a conditional use is a no. No, it's not. It's not even a maybe. It is a yes with the following conditions. So just make it permitted.
Okay, Commissioner Walton, any other comments? Sir?
Yep, I just was curious to know if Mr. Boatright had any specifics on why.
We're
good.
I am also in favor of the permitted instead of conditional as well. All right, 10.5C5, Gary. Any thoughts on this one?
Sorry, I'm only working off of one screen, so things are a little slower than normal.
You're good.
No, I think I'm good. I didn't have any notes written down on
Do you
that.
want to switch to the next page so you can see?
Yeah, do you want to scroll down? I think you
Oh, I've got it. but-
You got it? Okay.
Commissioner Lucy, any comments on this section?
No. Not that I can think of right now.
Commissioner Walton?
Yep.
Hey, where's you at?
Going back to your comment from the previous section, the one before it, about putting a number in there on density or units per acre.
Right.
I know we want to maintain character, and I'd rather try to do that through some application of design standard, instead of putting out a per acre density. I just seen it over and over where that kind of stifles some creativity from the developer standpoint. So I know we want to try to maintain a certain density, but I just don't feel like we can do that by a per acre basis. I'd rather look at the project as a whole.
So, okay, so if I understand what you just said, so if you're looking at let's say a 5-acre project and the density is, we'll say 7 units per acre, but that's all in 2 acres of the 5 acres and the other 3 acres is open space, you want the flexibility to be able to let a developer do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, how great is it to have that much open space?
Yeah.
Right, so it always seems like we get stuck on these density calculations. And I'd much rather just move away from that, but also look at an option to still allow and maintain a small town character with the way that we regulate how the building sits on the lot and how many people are going to be there versus a per acre measurement.
You and I were talking about that, but I can't remember the details. Are you okay?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different, there's a lot of thoughts around density and units per acre and how to dictate that. Some cities don't have a units per acre, they have a minimum lot size, right? Or things like that will itself limit the amount of units that you can put on an acre.
Isn't though that kind of the same thing?
It's yeah, essentially it's about the same.
Okay.
But what happens when you do a minimum lot size, what you'll see is a lot of the same lot sizes, right? Where ours is a units per acre with it has a minimum lot size, but also has a maximum lot size with a percentage that needs to happen. And so it allows some for variability and create some variation within the lots themselves. With this, in regards to density on this, the thinking was in conversation about creating any overlay zones, would we want to maintain the 7 units an acre? Would we want to reduce the acreage and then allow those overlay zones to allow for more acreage or density within that? A lot of it just comes down on planning philosophy, but Taylor brings up a good conversation and thought process of how do you mass those buildings to maintain the open space? What problems are you hoping to solve? And sometimes units per acre or even units per structure can limit that, right? So we have units per structure where we have 4. So that means we have a lot of 4 units where we could have maybe just had a 6 unit or an 8 unit structure and then more space for the project. So it's kind of I don't think that there's a perfect answer because everybody is trying a million different things to try to get that. But massing is, when you think about it, it allows for that preservation of open space for that other shared use on the lots versus even our single family uses use up a lot of acreage, and not everybody gets to enjoy that acreage as much as others. So
I think the other one that I had, it was the minimum lot width. Item number 2 there in the proposed, how did you title this? Not the proposed. Your alternate revision. So I really don't like, shall minimum lot width for all other dwelling types shall be recommended by the planning commission. Are we talking about a proposal here coming forward and we develop a recommendation on what that lot width is going to be for like a mansion style?
Yeah, basically. So what we could do in that case is if we want to call out mansion style, we can create a separate section for mansion style and
Okay,
call
so
out that, right?
We would still do that. We're not saying that we're going to leave that at the recommendation of the planning commission to
Right.
city council, because that's not going over well in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Should be defined.
Yeah, we can definitely define it. The hard part about defining like minimum lot area for a townhome use is what are we, some of them count the yards in front and behind, some of them do not, and the line ends right at the buildings, right? And so what do we want to have that minimum lot width in a townhome? And that we can say townhome use, that can be based on recommendation of the city planning commission to the city council. We do that in the PUDs, right? We did do that with the PUD ordinance where the setbacks and the lots were all recommended to the city council from the planning commission. So it's not abnormal for us to do that, but it does open, that conversation, and it makes a more legislative decision rather than administrative at that point.
Just following.
So Trevor, just to help me understand, you're saying that will be on a case-by-case basis? Is
Yes.
that what you're saying?
Yeah, the intent would be if a townhome project comes in, and they say, well, this is our townhome lots, then we would just look and make sure that those seem appropriate. Now we could put a minimum, they need to be at least 1,000 square feet, right? Or 2,000 square feet or whatever it might be. If we feel more comfortable with that to kind of get a baseline. But
See,
yeah, it would be.
So based on this discussion, I would rather have it defined, even if it is just a minimum. I mean, I've been in too many meetings where we end up being the designers and the architects, and I think that's not really our role. I don't believe, and so I would support defining that, even if it is just a minimum number, just something that's kind of concrete that we can go by and say, yes, this meets it, or no, it doesn't.
Yeah, I'd agree with that approach as well.
Well, and I think it takes out the personal opinions and it makes it to where everybody's being treated fairly, everybody's having the code applied to their development fairly. And kind of over the course of this discussion, I think one of the big things too is making sure that we've established a distance that we think, in terms of keeping open space and keeping, kind of the things that I think we're all trying to, keep here for South Weber, what's that distance going to be between each building that will promote the open space, and that we're not having developers come in and just stack as close. I mean, because you've seen some of these townhomes where, yes, there's separate buildings and there's 4 units, 5 units, 7 units, but they're within a foot to 2 feet. And I don't even, at that point, are you really even a separate building? You can't do anything. There's no walkway, there's no emergency access, and I think that's something that while we're rewriting this, let's pay attention to those details as well.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that more when we get to the setback list, but yeah, absolutely. So what would you recommend as the minimum lot area?
So, yeah, I don't have a clue. I'd have to understand like what's best practice.
It really, to me, depends on dwelling type. So I think we need more definitions for dwelling types.
Do we focus this right now just on townhomes, since that's kind of the one that we're,
I think that might be the most.
You know,
advantageous.
because obviously we'd like to see something if it's going to be the more mansion style or the cottage, what was the one, cottage
Cottage court.
court, that's going to have a different feel and it,
Would it be possible for staff to give us some examples, like, hey, this is what a minimum of 1,000 would look like,
Mhm.
or here's what a minimum of 3,000 looks like, something like that, so
Yeah.
we can have a
Yeah, absolutely.
visual on, okay, what does that really look like? 'Cause it's hard, I think, for me anyway, it's hard for me to visualize, what does that mean?
Mhm.
when you said, so our single family is 12,000 square feet.
Yeah, so right now this,
Or
on
two
the
bed.
R7, it has 12,000 square feet as a single family or 2 family dwelling.
Okay.
Our RP zone has at 6,000 square
RP is
feet.
6,000.
Yeah.
So obviously we want to be higher than 6,000 because a residential patio, meaning I don't know.
It depends. So if you're looking at a 2 family, then I feel like a 12,000 might be sufficient. Because you're splitting that 12,000 into two dwellings, right? So it's 6,000 per dwelling,
Mhm.
on average. But when we look at a single family, one, I don't know how lucrative a single family dwelling would be within the R7 zone. However, our RP zone allows 4 units an acre. The R7 would allow 7 units an acre. If we create our single family to be similar to the RP, right? And 6,000 square feet is the lot size for a single family home, then that would allow for more single family homes on the R7 lot.
Is there a way to find out what other cities, for townhomes, what their minimum lot size is?
Mhm.
Because if we started finding out that most of them, hey, it's 7,500 or it's 6,500 or 85, whatever the number is, if there kind of becomes a consensus in terms of, because I think that'll help with spatial.
Mhm. I've looked at some and I can pull up the data for the next meeting for sure. It is difficult because townhomes are just a different breed than a single family, right? And even though it's a single family attached, if you do 7,000 square feet, then you kind of mess up the massing of the building, right? So you could have smaller units on the end because they could put more square footage around them, but then you have to have a large front yard and backyard. And sometimes they don't want a front yard and backyard on the lot. They just want the lot to be the house and all of it's shared open space, right? So it's a little bit difficult on that.
One thought, and I don't know if this comes in with the spacing, or if this is more into the next section, but making sure that the frontage, that there is actually a front yard with the sidewalks and then a park strip area, so that we're not putting ourselves in a situation where we could have a townhome development come forward, but they're building right up to the sidewalk. You know, or even right up to the street, kind of, I don't think that's allowed, but just again, thinking of all of the things out there that we want to make sure we protect, and again, going back to creating that open space, you know, all that.
I just did some quick look up on, this is missingmiddlehousing.com. It's a pretty cool book when you read it, but it's talking about different housing types, and it does bring out townhouse. It says the area that you can expect for a townhouse to have for a lot would be 1,500 to 3,000 square feet is kind of the average of what they look at for each lot size. So that also depends on if you're just doing the home, right? If you're doing a 15,000 or 1,500 square foot for the home, and you double stack that on top of each other, that could be, you know, a 22,000 square foot house, or depend on garage and usable space, right? But or they have a yard behind it to allow for the 3,000 square feet. But that's kind of what this suggests, and I can pull up what other cities have as well.
I'm definitely with Gary on this, to having some kind of minimum for sure. So, yeah, I think I would lean towards, you know, what's best practice that would give us something that is going to avoid what Commissioner Wilson was talking about super stacking these units like crazy. I
Yep.
think something like that would make sense to me.
Mhm.
Sorry, we totally took over your time there,
It was
Commissioner.
a good conversation. I'm glad
It's
glad
a
to facilitate
discussion,
or
that's how
start it.
discussions happen.
Yep. I debated on this or not, but I think I'm just gonna make it known, like R7 and patio RP. What's the real difference that we're getting at between those two zones?
3 units an acre. That's the biggest difference, right? So if you look at a residential patio at 6,000 square feet, you can technically on an acre fit, without any roads, obviously that'd be a different factor, but you could technically fit 7 units per acre with a 6,000 square foot the lot size, right? Because a lot is, or acreage is 43,580, and so you're sitting about 7 units an acre. Our PED reduces that to allow for the open space and things like that. The R7 still requires open space for each unit and each unit type as well, and so that's also a factor there.
Does our residential patio have a height that's lower
It does have
than
that
residential
Mhm.
7? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that difference too.
I've just struggled with that a little bit, like,
Just
they're
smaller.
so close together in the way that they want to achieve a very similar product. I don't know. From an administrative perspective, it seems like wouldn't it make sense to try to combine these two, being so similar, but that's a discussion for another day.
So as we were looking at it, one thing that stuck out to me is that it feels that R7 was a zone that was built for single families, just as an increased density, and didn't really provide any structure on how to actually complete townhomes or other, even multifamily is a harder fit inside that zone because of the 12,000 square feet, the 100-foot minimum width, right? All of those are built towards single family. Also, they're more restrictive than the RP zone, which typically when you are going through the zones get less and less restrictive as you get higher on density. However, the density, then there's more provisions for like outdoor space, landscaping, that type of thing that's added in as a kind of a back scratch, right? You get this, and then we get this to enjoy because you're
We're giving you more.
giving you
units.
more units, right? So that's why the recommendation is perhaps if anything, we match what's on the RP for the single family use, so that it makes more logistical sense, and also maybe encourages a single family use within the zone.
Any other questions? Okay, I said my piece as well, so I'm good there. 10.5C6. Gary, over to you.
I don't believe I had any questions or concerns about that one.
We'll say this includes the setback table as well.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, I think I'm still good, but I reserve the right to comment if somebody else sparks a good discussion. So,
that sounds good. Commissioner Losey.
So I had a quick question. I know we've said the word street and setbacks from the street. Do we need to, for this zone, define what street? Because I know we have different street widths that are allowed throughout the city. Is that something that needs to be defined in our R7 code? Like it has to be a minimum street width of,
So since we have we have the private right-of-way ordinance that
okay,
dictates street widths and what's allowed within each zone.
okay,
And then I don't think that would necessarily be needed. What we see on the other zones is if you're on a 60-foot right of way, then here's the setbacks. And if you're on a 70-foot right of way, here's setbacks. That is something we can do if we feel it's necessary. The reason why we do that is because our roads do vary in size throughout the city. And so when we develop on a road that's already existing, they're not required to improve that road. If it's already improved, then they would just have to be subject to, okay, you're on a 60-foot right of way, your setback is 5 feet more than the 70-foot road.
and I
That
guess
makes sense, so.
why I'm bringing that up in terms of the street width, and I guess it also ties into driveways. And having a minimum driveway length requirement. And it's because there is a subdivision, Salt Point is Woodside Homes out in West Haven, that it's a townhome development that has a variety of different, building styles, orientations, but part of theirs, it has where all of the garages are backing each other, and it's basically a shared driveway where you have no parking available for each individual unit, and your only parking is available once you turn into your garage. And so how do we make sure that that's something that we know or let developers know upfront, that's not permitted? That you have to have a driveway space of this length? Because again, in this code, is that something that needs to be defined? Or is that something that's taken care of in other ordinances? Just because again, I think that's something that keeps the feel of, a bedroom community, which is what South Weaver is, regardless of how many people want it to be commercial, it's not. So how do we keep that? It helps for the open space, it helps for that community feel. And again, discussion, that's why I'm bringing that up.
I think just how it's written, when it says that subdivisions that utilize a shared common space. With that language in there, does that preclude us from ever being able to do the cottage style?
No. So shared common spaces still have a cottage style. So cottage style would have a shared common space that's within it.
But we're saying that when we have that shared common space, we're gonna orient the buildings away from that shared common space because the road is gonna be outside.
So this doesn't dictate the front of the building, it dictates the front of the lot. Does that make sense? So I know this is kind of a mind bending thing.
Yeah.
So we did 20 feet from the front of the lot based on the street, right? So if you are an alley loaded home, then you still would be required a 20-foot setback from the street to that garage, and the front of your building would be facing your rear setback.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
You say alley loading, and that just made my,
Well,
we don't want that.
It'll be a private.
It'd be a private
Private
road.
right of way, which, okay.
So that's the typical term, is an alley loaded. It just means that there's a private right of way in between. Now, because this is set up as a 20-foot setback, it will not be alleys like you're talking about the Salt Point,
Okay,
right?
okay.
So 20 feet is our typical driveway length. that we would be able to count it as a parking space.
And you would start that leg from back of the sidewalk. And because in order to count it as a parking space, it has to be 20 feet. That's why we do the 20 feet.
So, yeah, alley loaded is just a term for behind the house, right? It's you, which in all actuality, alley loaded townhome developments and even single family developments actually create more of a community feel because you have the shared open space on the front end of the home. So all the homes actually front maybe a shared walkway or a garden area or open space that they can utilize, and therefore creates that community feel from that. So what this does is when we're doing the lot, this just tells us the buildable area of that lot. Or if the structure is, if we're doing a shared common open space, then we look at how the structure is oriented. So the structure is oriented 20 feet back from the road. Whether they put the front of that structure towards the road or on the back of the road, we don't care. We just care where the front of that building is. And yeah, there's a lot of different examples. I can show you a few in the next meeting. We can pull up more examples to kind of give an idea for that. But
Can we get some 3D models? There you go.
got them. Got them.
Is it clear in our code that the front of your house can orient towards the back lot line?
Yeah, it doesn't say you can't. So
Yeah, that's
Well,
what I'm wondering. like,
When my
is it-
house got built, it could orient north or east, and they
Yeah.
chose to orient north, but
Do we have a definition for what is the front of your house?
no, we have a definition of front yard and backyard, right? But as far as the structure, if
what
you
your
put
address is.
the front door on the back of the house, then we don't necessarily care, right, Kim? Like when you're doing your building permits, we don't.
What matters, wherever your front of your house is,
Doesn't that determine your address?
it does, it determines your
Okay.
address. But, I don't care, yeah, that determines your address, which way,
Well-
where's the worst place,
I got it, okay.
other than,
So if it doesn't face the street, what's your address?
What would
that's
happen?
a really good question, I have not run up on the window. We'll have to-
We'll look at that. We'll look at that. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to imagine how that would look. Like, okay.
Up is down, left is right.
Isn't
Just
There is no
rotate it.
spoon.
There is.
Fit in every day. I want to look east.
That's where we're at.
All right, Commissioner Walton, anything else?
Yeah, sorry, I had one other thing. So on the frontages, we have 20 feet. And you said that was derived because of how? How do we get to 20?
Parking spots. So on a driveway,
So is it-
we can count their driveway as a parking if it's 20 feet. If it's less than 20 feet, we can't count it as parking. If we don't care about that and we just care that they provided parking somehow, then that's fine. But what we also are trying to limit is, where you have a 15-foot driveway and somebody still uses the parking and then obstructs right of ways and things
And
like
that's
that.
where I'm getting, like, I'm thinking about all the vehicles that you could park. And are we talking, moving vans come to mind? Like,
Mhm.
they're always in the sidewalk when they're coming and going. Not that we can, plan for all those circumstances. I'm just wondering, like, when we say 20 feet, is it backed by some other standard? Or some other definition in our code?
That's our parking width, right? That's this parking lane.
That's considered a legal parking space.
I can look in like an international code and see.
Okay.
If you've got a long.
Big
bed,
truck.
four-door truck, it could very well.
I have a
not
quick
be-
question.
I mean.
It's usually the trailer hitch.
So the IC,
Oh,
the International Building Code states that compact parking stalls should be not less than 18 feet. Parallel parking stalls should be 22 feet, and I could find a little bit more than that, but yeah. So that's our typical footage. measurement is 20 feet is how we counted it. And I think we look at for the typical use, not the outliers all the time, but
Right.
Is
if we
that
wanna-
what Freedom Landing, the parking spaces at Freedom Landing are 20 feet?
Mhm.
So if that gives you a visual, you could put a small car. I can park my truck there.
Yeah.
Without obstructing the
Current
sidewalk.
code, it's showing 30 feet as the standard. Is that?
So that 30 feet is the setback for the dwelling. So in
Oh,
single family,
not
30
necessarily
feet is the
garage.
setback, right? But that doesn't necessarily,
It's actually 25 now.
yeah. Yeah, it used to be 30. If you live on a 60-foot road or right of way, then it is still 30. But if you are on a 70-foot right of way, then you're at a 25-foot setback. And a lot of that is just to, accommodate for parking, allow for a larger driveway so that we can get those uses out of the park strip. However, if they do park over, then it is a code violation because they're impeding a right of way, right? So
So that, I guess that's really what I'm getting at. Like, is it 20 feet from the back of the curb?
Back at sidewalk.
back to
Back of
sidewalk.
the sidewalk.
So you still have the curb and the.
Yeah,
And the
because
driveway.
it's federal law to park over the sidewalk, so
Right.
you actually. have to
ADA.
be on
Mhm.
ADA, yeah.
That gives you another. what,
No, it
6,
doesn't.
7 feet?
No, because
No.
you can't
Well,
park over.
You
well,
can't park
true.
over it.
Well, I guess that's right. Okay, technically, yeah.
So there's a little bit. more-
Building wise, yes, it gives you another, really 12 feet because you have a 5 foot, well, it depends on the right of way, but.
I have a quick question. So on that setback table, we had the dwellings defined with the 30 feet, and yet when we've gone to dwelling, single family, dwellings, two family, twin home, multifamily, we've reduced down to 20 feet. Is it because it's,
We reduced it down because it matches the RP
okay,
zoning. So the RP has a 20-foot setback, 6-foot side setback, and a 10-foot rear setback.
so
Except
that
12 feet
came
on
from the
side
RP
street.
code.
That came from the RP code.
Okay,
So I think, back to my original comment, I'd recommend a larger setback on the front. It
Me
just
too.
never seems like there's enough space.
me
But-
too. And is this the spot to maybe insert too, where it would have a park strip requirement?
So
And
that's
spacing
in
for
a
that,
private right of way.
that's just private right of way for
Mhm,
park strips.
mhm.
But if they don't utilize a private right of way and it's a city maintained street,
Then they would be required to park.
they would be required to park strip. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's all part of the right of way. So the right of way includes the street, curb gutter, park strip, sidewalk. Or if the sidewalk and park strip are separated, then a sidewalk and then a public utility easement behind that.
I have a quick question, and this might be a little segue, but park strips, do we have requirements for what can go into park strips right now?
We do not.
In terms of like vegetation? I know we're doing the whole flip the strip and we, had that where it was, you could take out the grass and,
So when we did our landscape ordinance, we made it available for them to put rock mulch or water-wise landscaping,
mhm.
but didn't make it a firm requirement that they had to comply that within their park strip.
Okay,
Plant corn and shit.
I could. I'm not going to.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No,
I just had a question with the setback. So you were recommending larger than 20 feet. So I guess maybe I'm just unaware, but are we constantly running into issues with the existing 20 feet that's already in place being issues like all the time? Is that?
so my experience just driving around is I'm not sure if it's 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the structure, but it always feels like it's never quite enough. Like, especially if you have an extended cab truck with a long bed and a trailer hitch. Like I said, it's usually a trailer hitch that finds needs. And I'm just saying, like,
Right.
maybe 25 feet makes more sense than 20. I know we're splitting hairs. But I would like to err on the side of caution on that one, because we want to preserve clear movement of the sidewalk.
Sure, okay. So then my question to you, Trevor, is if we were to go forward with something like that, well, obviously the city council would have to agree with that first of all, but let's just say we all agree and you have 25 feet, does that severely limit our like options that come to the table, or is that extra 5 feet not that critical?
I don't think it would be a complete deal breaker. I mean, obviously they would much rather you have a 0 setback and allow them to put like, right,
Developers would.
developers would, right?
Could we make the
Not the city
driveway like a
council.
specific call out though, instead of just, hey, the building has to be as far as say, as long as you have 25 feet of driveway, the building could be within 6 feet. We don't, or something
So-
like that.
What's the
Where-
5 extra feet going to add? I mean, that's a small car. I mean, I don't think that's gonna add anything. People are still going to park on the street because their back end is going to be in the sidewalk, even with that 5 extra feet.
I think it's just based upon experience as I go through these neighborhoods, you always seem to have a longer truck that parks and give them a little bit more wiggle room out in front of their garages a little bit to maneuver, but also I always see, the back end of a truck parked over the sidewalk. And it just seems, why not give ourselves a little bit of extra room there?
Well, we have a community that is very active in terms of outside walking dogs, kids on bikes, kids on scooters, parents pushing strollers, pulling wagons, things like that. And to give that extra little bit of space, again, just to allow people to be on the sidewalks where they want to be, I think it helps. I know we increased our sidewalk with new developments, which is great, because now you can actually have people walking side by side instead of, in front of each other. It doesn't hurt.
Let's be honest, people who walking, they're not walking on the sidewalks, they're walking in the middle of the street.
That's true too. Well, I wasn't gonna bring those people up because I don't understand why they're walking in the middle of the street, but
The other argument could be made is giving developers a requirement to actually fit 2 cars in a 2-car garage instead of.
ding, 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 ding.
And that would actually require people to clean out their garages.
I know, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's not the garages, it's,
Sometimes it's the garage.
Sometimes it's the garage.
My
I know
garage
some
is
people that
awful.
don't have any space to park a
So-
car in their garages.
Yeah.
It's storage.
All right, so maybe what we do here, Trevor, is maybe we have a couple of solutions that you can come back to us with and say, hey, this is what it would look like, this is the impact. And then maybe we can make a little bit more of an informed decision.
Yeah.
that way.
So just to clarify on the, do we want to increase the front to 25 feet and maintain the rear at 20 feet? Or you're okay reducing the rear to 15 feet? Like,
That's,
We're
we
wondering if
knew
that's what
you were,
you're
I'm like, he's gonna go measure his truck.
a
And it's a short bed.
a Ford F-150 with a crew.
Strike is 21.
What was that, Gary?
Oh, I think Blair said the same thing. I just looked up the size of a F-150 crew cab extended bed and it was about 21 feet.
21 feet. You can go measure my Tundra if you want. We'll just,
It's about 20.
about 20, okay.
So I think the argument is 20 feet may not be enough,
Sufficient.
but what you're saying is, do we want to subsidize that to where, are we okay having shorter setbacks in the rear to compensate for the longer setback in the front?
Well, I think that comes down to what do we want to allow our minimum square footage area to be? Because if it's 6,000 versus increasing it, that's gonna have an impact on setbacks and your buildable area and what you can put. So I think it all kind of plays together. But again, what overall are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, maybe it's a combination of increasing the square footage so that it makes that longer driveway more.
Those setbacks allowable, front and
Allowable.
back.
So
Does that make sense?
And between the buildings and on the sides and all
so,
of it.
so with townhomes, because this is where it's,
Tricky.
where all the trickiness comes in.
Yeah.
Because townhomes, if they decide to plat with a front and backyard, then that's your square footage, right? But if they decide to plat with just the building area, then that's a different square footage, right? And so it's just
So
what do we want to, if we say like 6,000 square feet, right? Then we're gonna say that you have to have a front and backyard. 6,000 square feet, if you do a 30-foot width, means you're gonna have to do a 200-foot length, right? And that may not be feasible for, I mean, you could do it, but I don't know if it would be feasible in a townhome situation.
So I would go
So-
back to my other comment of, would it make sense to add something like the minimum driveway length must be 25 feet? And then they can play with the design from there. Would that make a lot more sense to specifically call out the driveway length for that parking spot? Because that would settle what we're talking about.
I'm against that, just to be clear. I think we're making accommodations for a very small portion of the community. If they can't fit their vehicles in their driveway, then they need to get a bigger house or a bigger piece of property to park it. If they're hanging over the edge, that's an enforcement problem. We need to enforce that if it's an issue. I just think we're getting way too much into the weeds and all hypotheticals and this and that. So.
Yeah, I would only disagree with you from the perspective, Gary, that I think our community has a lot of trucks and a lot of larger vehicles. Like, I think 80% of my neighbors have a big truck in their driveway.
And do you live in townhomes or in single family?
Well, that's a good call. That's a good call. I'm in the single family, so I don't know if it's the same ratio per se. So yeah, you got a good point. So it's just a matter of
Drive
what
through
makes the
Freedom
most sense.
Landing, and then you'll know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Again, drive through the townhome communities that we do have existing and kind of see what the parking potential looks like.
So maybe we just go back to my original ask of, let's see what both recommendations look like and see, and then we can make a recommendation up to this council from there, and then they can decide what they want.
Sorry,
Sound good, Blair?
I wasn't tracking the rear lot line for two-family twin homes and multifamily dwellings being more than single family.
That was a request from the code committee. So that's what was included in this. I think when you're looking at it, it's all subjective. Setback lines are just kind of what we would like the massing and structure of the buildings to be. I think as you increase that setbacks, if they have to own all of that, then that's different than if it's shared open space, right? And so as we mass those buildings, if you have a 20-foot setback between buildings, I think that's fine. Because that's like a 10-foot, like if you were to draw the lines right at 10 feet, then
Well, you're bringing up a good point, because in terms of the townhomes, you're only owning the land that is underneath the structure, correct?
typically, or
you don't
it can
have-
extend out a little bit, but typically you're not owning
Okay.
all the acreage behind it.
Because in terms of the front yard requirement, backyard requirement,
HOA.
that would all be the HOA that would be maintaining, and, you know, if any issues came up, and fencing and things like that. So,
You good?
I'm still kind of stuck on that, like why 10 feet for single family and 20 feet for multifamily?
The idea is that you're orienting it based off the buildings, right? So the rear, you'd have 20 feet between buildings. So it'd still be 10
So it's almost like
feet.
having two townhomes back to back. You want to make sure there's at least 20 feet.
They shared all the 20 feet behind the building. So it's similar to a single family when you have a lot and a lot and they have 10-10.
can we get some diagrams?
Yes. we
Because
can-
that will be helpful for
Yeah.
next meeting.
And I'm seeing it, I just, and I get trying to provide some additional green space for those who are gonna be a little bit more tightly, that's all making. I'm just, I'm wondering why 10 feet versus single family.
Do you think that's too little or?
No,
Okay.
I mean, if in theory, you could have two homes, single family homes back to back, and you could be within 20 feet of one another.
That's what our current patio home.
Yeah.
Setbacks are. So that's where that was patterned off of the townhome setback.
Yeah, I'm just struck by the two side by side,
Mhm.
meaning like the multifamily versus single family. And single.
Mhm.
Like, what is it we're trying to accomplish with that? And then It's different for every dwelling type.
Mhm.
That's why, I don't know, just a head scratcher for me.
So maybe some visuals there could help.
Yep, I can get some visuals. We can also include visuals in the code to demonstrate. And I don't think that's a bad idea to show, this is this is what we're intending on the massing here and what we're looking at, so that we can just show them and say, make it something like this and we'll be happy.
That sounds awful like a form-based code.
Yeah. What? Form-based
I say
code?
that out loud.
You did.
All right, any other comments to close us up, or are we good to let staff go forward and draw this up?
I'm good.
Commissioner Wilson?
I'm good
Commissioner
for now.
Boatright?
I'm good as well, but I don't like 25 feet, so,
You don't
Okay.
like 25 feet?
no.
And that's
Oh, okay.
along your driveway. Got it. All right, moving on to number 5, comments by the commissioners. Commissioner Boatright, any comments for us this evening?
Yes, just one. I just want to acknowledge my mathematical error in my public comments to the city council a few weeks ago regarding our pay increase. I figured out my problem, and that's why I went into history and not math. So I reached out to Councilwoman Petty and expressed my apologies for my bad math, and grateful for those on the council and staff who corrected me. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Wilson?
I just wanted to say I appreciated the accommodation in switching the planning commission meeting till tonight, so that actually the majority of the commission was able to attend the
There you
APA.
thank you, APA. I was like American Planning Association Conference last week down in Lehigh. It was actually very educational. There was a lot of good discussion. It was really good to hear from other cities. Hear how a lot of them are just as frustrated with the moderate income housing requirements, whatever it is. Yeah, mandate, they're just as frustrated, and just to kind of hear how some of the newer cities, the growing pains they're going through, the smaller cities, what they're dealing with. I've decided that we should start a twin sister program or twin city program, however that works. Sister city program, thank you, with Mapleton, because I actually think in terms of size, location, like we're actually very similar, like the farming, the preservation, like the small town feel, the sense of community. I don't know how we do that, but anyways, I appreciate the commission for that. So
We'll
thank
make
you.
them bracelets.
Yep, something, I don't know, stickers.
Lockets will break apart.
Love it.
So that was it.
Thank you, Commissioner Walton.
Just something that came out of that planning summit for APA. It sounds like ADUs and, well, specifically, I was thinking about ADUs.
Mm.
That might be something that might be pushed a lot more into addressing housing issues,
Yeah.
housing shortages, and I just don't think we've really addressed it.
External one.
External.
Yep.
Well, guess what? On moderate income housing, we get to
It
address
is.
it.
Yeah, so I just didn't know a schedule for bringing that stuff up. If we wanted to be
I
a little
think
bit more
within the next-
proactive.
On your foot.
Yeah, within the next year, we're gonna be working on
Talking about it. Okay.
Cool.
Yay.
it. Item E, I believe.
Anything else?
That's it.
I, like Commissioner Wilson, wanted to express my gratitude also for all the commissioners for being so flexible. Because I too walked away with a lot of better understanding when I went into that conference. So thank you, Trevor, for getting that set up for us.
And our CE's checked, right?
Yeah, you
For
guys
the
are,
year.
you guys are learning.
So that's
Except for Gary.
Yeah, except for Gary. We'll fill you in.
Sounds good.
He's so looking forward to that.
Looking forward to his dinner, I think. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for your flexibility and for spending time together at the conference. That was really great to see you guys. So that's all I got. Yeah, go ahead.
So like we mentioned, moderate income housing plan has been approved by the city council. So the items were B, E, and I. B is, deals with infrastructure. So that's something that we don't necessarily have to deal with in the planning commission setting. But the other two will be items that we will be tackling over the course of the next 2 years. Basically, it'll be a little while, working through. E was, accessory dwelling units, and I was looking into single room occupancies.
No,
Well, we're looking into
I'm
it.
kidding.
So we're gonna look at the regulations around those, updating our regulations, but then also not to scare anyone, but in 2024 is the 5-year anniversary of when we started our general plan process. And so in the next 3 years, we'll be working on the South Weaver City General Plan update, but not like a throwaway update. It's just let's take into account some of these other measures that we just did with our moderate income housing, update the general plan accordingly, and look at the plan in general and make sure we're still good with it.
It's starting in 2024?
Yes.
So Trevor, are you saying that we can open it up, look at it and say it's good for another 5 years and send it on? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
You can make that recommendation as the planning commission if you wish. Yeah. However, there are some state mandates that we do have to address in our general plan a little bit more in detail, and one of those is water conservation. They give us until 2025 to update that, so that works perfectly with our timeline. But we do have to update that work with the state mandate on that.
Understood.
Anything else?
Until it changes.
But I know all of us want to touch it as much as the next guy. So we're okay leaving that closed for a couple more years.
All right, thank you, Trevor. All right, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
So moved. Just kidding. All in favor?